Hi, my name is Nicholas Cordell, and I have the pleasure of speaking to you today about the history of Ronald Reagan's presidency and how it's shaped our world. Was Ronald Reagan really the devil? Ronald Reagan served as president over 30 years ago. His policies set the United States on a different course from the rest of the world. People don't typically remember Reagan in a positive light, but was he as bad as we make him out to be? And are we still suffering because of his policies? I'm someone who is avidly and consistently studying history and have spent a lot of personal time researching Ronald Reagan. And I have a lot of personal feelings about how his decisions have affected future generations. As we know, history is written by the victor, and textbooks have always painted past presidents in a positive way. Privately owned media outlets have the unique position to talk about important figures however they want, protected under the First Amendment. The first time that I had ever seen Ronald Reagan depicted in a negative light was actually in an adult cartoon. In the opening of the first episode of the Boondocks, Garden Party, one of the main characters incites a riot of Caucasian aristocrats by proclaiming to them that Ronald Reagan is the devil. This was to allude that the only people who benefited from Reagan's policies were rich, white, and they were completely baffled with that opinion. Likewise, in Season 3, Episode 15 of American Dad, there's a Schoolhouse Rock spoof which lays out the events of the infamous Iran-Contra deal. In this song, they directly point out that Reagan committed high treason and has direct connections, of which the evidence was destroyed by a secretary named Fawn Hall. It's not just cartoons either. There are plenty of documentaries which don't hold back, one of which is called The Reagans. The Showtime original documentary series titled The Reagans delves into the history and inner workings of Reagan's presidency. The 4-episode series covers his rise from Hollywood and his career change to politics, his use of racist dog whistles in the election, and the lasting effects of Reaganomics and the Iran-Contra affair. That's how he's remembered today. But what was the consensus on his presidency back in the 80s? What were the details of Reaganomics and how exactly did they play out? Well, Reagan gave tax cuts with the intention of creating a quick economic boom. For 92 months, the United States enjoyed a 36% increase to the GDP and as well as 20 million jobs. Reagan aimed at strengthening a weakened military that he inherited from President Carter. To do this, he increased the defense budget for 6 consecutive years, creating an unstable defense industry as well as a reinvigorated American military. To afford all this, he cut spending to programs which were aimed at aiding the scapegoats of the Americans' problems, the African American community. Reagan was convinced that tax money going to social programs like food stamps was a plague. He called the individuals using these programs freeloaders, knowing that the primary users of these programs were the marginalized African American community. A rise in poverty led to a rise in crime, which he aimed to stomp out with an iron fist. Reagan began his war on drugs, an extension of what President Nixon started, and was later revealed to be a direct attack on Vietnam protesters and African Americans. This new war, though, cost American taxpayers billions of dollars and did next to nothing to solve the root cause of the drug epidemic. It was later rumored to have been fueled by an influx of cocaine from the Colombian rebel group, the Contras. It was also criticized for ignoring the realities of the current situation of poverty and its clear discriminatory nature. These are pretty heinous accusations, but are we still feeling their effects? How are we suffering from these policies over 30 years ago? People argue that Reagan being elected was the beginning of the end for the American middle class. Economic data shows that since 1990, the wealth gap between the top 10% and the average American has exponentially grown and shows no signs of stopping. Reagan pledged to balance the United States budget in 1980. When he assumed office in 1981, the federal debt was $7.9 billion. But by the time he left his presidency in 1989, it was $2.9 trillion. Leaving future generations to work off the immense debt that their grandparents and great-grandparents benefited from. Since Reagan took the reign of the war on drugs, Americans saw incarceration rates nearly triple over the course of 10 years. In the 20 years after he was gone, we watched it triple again, mostly consisting of African Americans. Reagan knowingly gave weapons to Iran with the intent of supporting their ongoing war with Iraq, a special interest of Israel, who was an American ally. This was an act of high treason and a clear abuse of power. When the facts were uncovered, Oliver North took the fall and destroyed the incriminating evidence which potentially linked Reagan directly to this deal. The never-ending wars in the Middle East, some of which we've participated in, were a cascading series of events directly affected by the Iran-Contra affair. We sit now in a position to judge because we have the power of hindsight. I can't say that Reagan left behind a better country than he found it. We know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and Reagan's policies might have come from a good place, but they have sent America and parts of the rest of the world on a darker path that we are still struggling to recover from. I leave you with this: if we don't learn from our history, we are doomed to repeat it. Thank you.